I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
A new chapter begins with Donald Trump declaring the golden age of America starts right now. Thousands brave sub-zero temperatures here in Washington to witness history. As he leaves the White House, Joe Biden gives presidential pardons to members of his own family, worried about future politically motivated prosecutions. Among the inaugural guests, titans of tech, billionaires now more powerful than ever before.
I will very simply put America first.
He delights his supporters with a slew of measures on day one, including curbing immigration, more drilling for oil, and scrapping government diversity initiatives. And this is the scene live at the Capital One Arena, where President Trump is due to make an appearance.
In our other main news tonight, there's to be a public inquiry into the Southport attacks last July after a teenager pleads guilty to the murders of 3 girls he stabbed to death at a dance class. Alice Aguiar, Elsie Dot Stankham and B.B. King were killed by Axel Rudakubana in the attack. He also admitted the attempted murder of 8 other children and 2 adults and a terror offence.
On BBC London, decades of decay. We find out how many years patients are going to have to wait for the capital's crumbling hospitals to be rebuilt.
Hello to you from a freezing cold Washington, where Donald Trump has been sworn in for a second term as the 47th President of the United States. In his inaugural address, he promised to put America first and said he'd immediately start signing orders to prevent illegal migration, encourage oil exploitation and scrap government diversity programs, moves that will delight the millions of people who voted for him and send shockwaves right around the world. Well, we're going to take a look at some of the key measures he announced on this day one of his presidency and assess what impact they might have. But first, here's Sarah Smith on how this historic day has unfolded so far.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
For Donald John Trump, this is not just a solemn oath of office. For him, this is vindication and it's victory.
Welcome home.
Welcome home, Joe Biden said, as he greeted the Trumps earlier at the White House, as it is their house now, again. There was none of this courtesy the last time when Donald Trump snubbed the Bidens and skipped town. Both men then entered the beast, the armoured presidential car, riding together, however uncomfortably, on their way to officially transfer power from one to the other. Inside the Capitol, former presidents did turn up by tradition, but his wife couldn't face it.
Present arms!
Former First Lady Hillary Clinton put on a brave face. She's the candidate Mr. Trump defeated in 2016.
The Honorable Joseph R. Biden Jr.
Joe Biden says he thinks he could have beaten him last year if he hadn't let Kamala Harris run instead and lose. And what is the collective noun for a gathering of the world's richest men? All the tech billionaires who turned up to offer enthusiastic support. Gathered inside the Capitol Rotunda that was invaded by violent Trump supporters on the 6th of January 2021. For him, it's been a long journey back to the centre of power, overcoming criminal indictments, 1 conviction and 2 assassination attempts to perform the ultimate political comeback. After all that, he was then defeated by his wife's hat. before promising to start a new era in America.
The golden age of America begins right now.
Making big promises about transforming the country.
A tide of change is sweeping the country. Sunlight is pouring over the entire world. And America has the chance to seize this opportunity like never before.
He attacked what he claimed was a corrupt and incompetent government under Joe Biden and revelled in his own triumph.
Over the past 8 years, I have been tested and challenged more than any president in our 250-year history. And I've learned a lot along the way. The journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again.
The promises he made on the campaign trail now being repeated in a sombre presidential tone, beginning with his signature issue.
First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border.
He got a standing ovation for the promise of a harsh crackdown on immigration.
We will drill, baby, drill.
He will also declare a national energy emergency to allow for more drilling for oil and reverse Joe Biden's climate change measures. He'll introduce tariffs on imported goods, declare there are only two sexes, which cannot change, and get rid of diversity initiatives. And then he wants to reach for the stars.
And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars.
It may have been with considerable relief that the Bidens then took off and left Washington behind them. Tens of thousands of Trump supporters have flooded into the Capitol, the lucky ones getting to view the action from inside a sports arena. Watching Elon Musk take to the stage, he's given himself the title of First Buddy. But he really needs to curb his enthusiasm. He's being accused of giving a Nazi salute.
Thank you.
And that's even by users on his own social media platform, X. As Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump chooses to use a more traditional salute as he formally inspects the troops. After all this ceremony, it will soon be time to get down to work. He's made a lot of big promises about transforming America and changing the world. Now he has to deliver.
Sarah, let's actually begin with the man who's just left the building across the way there, Joe Biden, issuing a number of pardons for his own family. How much of a surprise shock was that?
Yeah, this was a real surprise because it's an extremely unusual thing to do, to issue preemptive pardons. So he says, as far as he knows, they haven't done anything wrong, but he's worried that the Trump administration are going to try and investigate, possibly prosecute members of his family. So he's pardoning them in advance just in case that happens. And he did the same for some people who were in the last Trump administration and everybody who was involved in the select committee that investigated the January the 6th riots. All got these preemptive pardons.
Okay. Let's go back to the man now who has taken over the keys for the White House. A slew of policy initiatives, tough rhetoric as well, delighting his supporters.
Yes, absolutely. And very soon he'll arrive at that sports arena and speak to them in person. They've been waiting all day for that to happen. And we expect that whilst he's there, he will start signing some presidential executive orders to make happen the things he promised in his speech, including if he declares a national emergency on the border, he can then send military troops to the border, which will make a real difference. And he can probably, at the stroke of a pen, withdraw from the Paris Climate Accords as well, which he's promised to do.
All right. Sarah Smith, our North America editor, thank you for that. We're going to go straight to Gary O'Donoghue, who's inside the Capital One Arena, not far from our position here, where President Trump is due to take part in more inauguration celebrations, including the traditional parade, albeit indoors, Gary. The frigid weather forcing, 20,000 people to fill that arena. The president there effectively on another rally.
It's going to be another rally. It's going to be one of those rallies we've seen over the months and the past years, and I expect him to say all the same kinds of things. The military bands that would have been marching down Pennsylvania Avenue if it wasn't so cold are here playing right now. On the stage is the traditional podium. On the edge of the stage is a desk with a microphone and a chair and a presidential seal. We're expecting him to sign many of those executive actions and orders in front of this crowd of 20,000 people. Now, that is a moment of theatrics. It's something clearly Donald Trump wants to do among his own people. But bear in mind, even when he signs these things, presidents cannot spend new money. They cannot conjure money out of the air. That is for Congress to do. So a lot of these things will be intentions, desires, proclamations, things he wants to happen, but the signing, the actual act of putting pen to paper doesn't actually make them happen, Clive.
All right, Gary, for now, thank you for that. We'll rejoin you when the president arrives at the arena. Gary O'Donoghue in the warm there. Thousands brave sub-zero temperatures outside to get a glimpse of President Trump as his convoy moved between official events today. Many had hoped to be among the crowds watching the swearing-in ceremony on the National Mall, but the Arctic weather forced the event indoors. Tom Bateman has been talking to some of those who still ventured out to see the president.
They waited 4 years and 1 night, and in a cold as bitter as America's divisions, USA! USA! The gates opened to the dawn of Trump 2. Kimberly and John flew with their 3 daughters from Tennessee.
We feel like the person at the top is going to be relating to everything that we deal with, whether it's, safety in the community, parents in charge of their children, an economy that works, where you keep more money in your pocket.
Donald Trump got here by broadening his base. And for one day only, they filled the streets of Democrat-dominated D.C.
We want to have our borders closed, and we want to know that we're safe and not just let anybody and everybody in.
Do you think Trump can actually do this? I mean, what he's talking about would cost billions and billions, could take years. There aren't necessarily the resources to do it.
Hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. Yeah, we can 100%.
There were 250,000 tickets issued before Donald Trump moved the inauguration indoors. Now, the sports venue that these people are queuing to watch it can only take a tenth of that number, so a lot of people are going to miss out.
On the march to the far-right Proud Boys, whose leaders were jailed for sedition after the violent insurrection of January 6th. They want President Trump to free them. His opponents now warn of oligarchy and authoritarianism.
Here we go, here we go.
And as the big moment neared, crowds packed the bars to see him sworn in. How are you feeling?
Oh my. Let's go. It's the happiest I've been in a very long time. We got our country back.
The future is bright for America.
Yes, sir.
If you want to start a business, there's no better time to be an American with this man coming into office. He is going to light this economy on fire. We are going to be the envy of the rest of the world.
It's been a long time. Yes. We're ready.
A return to power for this half of America, energized by Mr. Trump's promises. They salute his second start, a presidency that now hangs on the weight of their expectation. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Washington.
Some of the delighted Trump supporters here in Washington. That's it from us here in the Capitol for the moment. We'll be back a little later, but now it's over to you, Rita, in London for the rest of the day's news.
Clive, thank you. A public inquiry has been announced by the government into the murders of 3 young girls who were stabbed to death at a dance class in Southport last year. Today, the teenager accused of killing them pleaded guilty to murder on the first day of his trial. Axel Rudakubana, who's now 18, killed 9-year-old Alice Aguiar, Elsie Stankham, who was 7, and 6-year-old BB King. He also admitted the attempted murder of 8 other children and 2 adults and a terror offence. He'll be sentenced on Thursday. Judith Moritz reports.
This is Axel Rudakabana, 18 years old and guilty of murdering and stabbing children just a few years younger than he is. He was brought to court in Liverpool for the first day of his trial, with a jury being made ready. But Rudakabana had no intention of it going ahead. His face covered, asked to confirm his name, he wouldn't reply. Told to stand, he refused to get up. But then his lawyer said he wanted to change his pleas. 16 times he was asked if he was guilty or not guilty. Muffled behind his face mask, he said guilty each time.
This was an unspeakable attack, one which has left an enduring mark on our community and the nation for its savagery and senselessness. It is clear that this was a young man with a sickening and sustained interest in death and violence. He has shown no signs of remorse.
Rudakabana murdered 3 little girls, 6-year-old BB King, Elsie Stankham, aged 7, and Alice Aguiar, who was 9. 8 other children and 2 adults were stabbed too during a Taylor Swift-themed dance class.
And I heard all the screaming, and then all the young kids come running down the road. One of them covered in, well, 4 of them were being stabbed. And he ran across to me, instead of being stabbed, thinking I'm going to die. So I just took them all in the house.
Rudakabana had left his house earlier, pacing up and down before catching a taxi. Mechanic Colin Parry saw him arrive and refused to pay the driver. He challenged Rudakabana, who got aggressive.
I said, pay the taxi, and I swore at him. I said, pay the taxi, and then he just told me to, well, he didn't. He just said, what are you going to do about it?
A picture's starting to emerge of issues within Axel Rudakabana's past. Neighbours have told us that the police visited the family home here on several occasions in the couple of months leading up to the attack. A week before the stabbing, Rudakabana tried to return to his old school on the last day of term. It's thought to attack children as they left the building. He'd booked a taxi there, but that time his father ran out and stopped him. He'd been expelled from the school 5 years earlier, having taken a knife there, which he didn't use. Dylan Pemberton's daughter was a pupil there at the same time.
My daughter had witnessed him chasing a kid with a hockey stick outside a maths class through one of the corridors, and it was apparently well known to her and her friends and to the school that he had a kill list.
After his arrest, Rudakabana was found to have a study of an Al-Qaeda training manual and the poison ricin in a box under his bed. He's not known to have a single ideology, which police say is why the attack wasn't treated as terrorism. But the teenager was referred to the government's counter-terrorism prevent programme 3 times in 3 years and was known to a range of other agencies. The government's announced a public inquiry, saying there are grave questions to answer as to how the state failed in its ultimate duty to protect the young girls. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Southport.
Emily Damari, the British-Israeli national who was released from 15 months' captivity in Gaza yesterday, is in high spirits, her mother has told a news conference in Israel. Emily was one of 3 Israeli hostages freed as the Gaza ceasefire began. 90 Palestinian prisoners were released later from an Israeli prison. The UN says that 915 aid trucks have entered Gaza today. This report from Lucy Williamson contains some disturbing images.
Israel saw this as the price for its hostages. Many Palestinians saw it as a prize for Hamas. Dozens of women and minors freed from Israeli jails last night and welcomed home with Hamas flags, waved above a jubilant crowd.
I left hell and now I'm in heaven. We are out of hell. They used to violate us, beat us, fire tear gas toward us. They used to count us while our heads were down on the floor.
At the handover of hostages in Gaza yesterday, Hamas gave each one a bag with mementos of their captivity, including a map of Gaza and a certificate of release. A public statement, like the crowds around them, designed to show a group with resources and support. The 3 women are now recovering with their families in hospital. Tonight, the mother of British-Israeli hostage Emily Damari spoke publicly for the first time.
I'm delighted to be able to tell you that Emily is in high spirits and on the road to recovery. As you will have seen last night, she is an amazingly strong and resilient young woman. Please keep on fighting for the remaining 94 hostages who need to come home.
A different kind of homecoming for Palestinians in Gaza, allowed back for the first time in months to find skeletons in the rubble. Ali Ashur from Khan Yunis is looking for his son.
Even if his features are not clear and he is a skeleton, I will know and identify him, because I am a father, and I would know my son from a million people, even if his face has no features.
Some Israeli forces have begun leaving Gaza, but there's no agreed plan for how it will be run long term. This truce raises difficult decisions for Israel's Prime Minister, determined that the road to peace doesn't lead to a Palestinian state. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Back now to President Donald Trump's inauguration and to Clive in Washington. Clive.
Yeah, thanks again, Rita. We're going to show you pictures from the Capital One Arena, which are coming in. A marching band is playing, and already seated on the stage are members of the Trump family. There, his two sons up there, all waiting, along with 20,000 people, for the arrival of the new president. This effectively a rally on day one, something that he likes to do while he prepares for the beginning of what will be a colourful next 4 years in the White House. And among the executive actions announced in his inaugural address today, President Trump spoke about immigration. He's set to declare a national emergency at the US-Mexico border and has plans for large-scale deportations of undocumented migrants. John Sudworth reports now from Chicago, where he's been speaking to people fearful of the new measures.
Chicago's immigrant communities are on edge. This city is one of those singled out by senior Trump officials as ground zero for his sweeping immigration crackdown. Doris Aguirre is an undocumented migrant who's lived here for 25 years, working, paying taxes and raising a family.
I had everything in this country. I had a home, have my husband, my children, my jobs. For that, it's very sad for me, the news about the president.
We will begin the largest deportation operation in the history of the United States.
On the campaign trail, Donald Trump drove his message of fear all the way to the White House.
Illegals into our country.
But it was based on a misconception. Rather than an invasion, America has long been dependent on the work of these migrants in agriculture and manufacturing, making them both essential and dispensable. Last year, the number of deportations on Joe Biden's watch far surpassed those carried out during Mr. Trump's first term. Those protesting Mr. Trump's new executive orders in Chicago say they're used to having to fight for immigrant rights.
Some of what's been announced today is for political effect, and many of the executive orders may well be challenged in the courts, but there can be no doubting the intent. Donald Trump once said he would make people's heads spin with what he did on day one, and for his opponents these feel like dizzying and dark times.
The biggest blow to our community is living in fear. You know, when communities are living in fear, they don't go to work, they don't go to school. Long term, that has an impact not just on the immigrant communities, but it has an impact on our entire city and entire country as a whole.
It was fear that gave Mr. Trump his mandate, and in a country that once defined itself on openness, his first actions show he intends to deliver. John Sudworth, BBC News, Chicago.
I'll look at some of the comments in the inaugural address on migration there, but it was light on specifics on trade, with no mention of new tariffs on Canada, Mexico or China, for instance, something he'd promised on day one. Faisal Islam, our economics editor, is at the World Economic Forum in Davos for us now. Faisal, what's been the reaction to the prospect of tariffs where you are?
Yeah, President Trump was focused on energy dominance for America, on a golden age for Americans, understandably. But the question here for executives and financiers and other world leaders is what exactly is he going to do on world trade? Some relief about the fact that there were no specifics announced in that inaugural address. But there were some pretty choice phrases. He said that a massive amount of money will be pouring into our treasury from other countries. That's from these tariffs. Firstly, after a review of the trading relationships with Canada, Mexico and China, but some of the talk on Capitol Hill where you are is of hundreds of billions of dollars being raised, over $1 trillion, an unbelievable amount, and you'd have to think that that might also involve Europe if he was serious. And that is the question. How serious is he? How quickly are these going to come about? What are the consequences, not just in terms of American policy, but how other countries will retaliate? The global economy doesn't seem to be out of the woods there yet. There's hope for growth, but still question marks. Donald Trump addresses this place from the White House on Thursday.
Faisal, thank you. Faisal Islam there at that World Economic Forum meeting in Davos. We're going to take you back to the Capital One Arena here in Washington, where President Trump is walking through the crowds, just arrived. His family are already on stage. Gary O'Donoghue, our correspondent, is there. Gary, just paint a picture of the atmosphere.
Yeah, they're very excited here now, Clive. The 47th President Donald Trump has come down the stairs into the arena. He's clutching a binder, which he's waving around, pointing to, and we can only presume, I think, and certainly the crowd presumes, is that binder is full of those executive orders and those executive actions that he plans to sign in front of these 20,000 people in the next few minutes. Lined up there, his family too, even his 18-year-old son, Barron, who was a huge hit when he first came into the auditorium, the crowd chanting his name. And now they're just anticipating what they're going to hear from their new president and this new era of American politics. All these actions he's promised, he's brought them with him, and he's going to sign them right now, right here, in front of his fan base.
Indeed, he's enjoying the adulation there. What's he going to sign, do we think, Gary?
Well, there's a whole range of things we know in terms of the immigration, the southern border, this national emergency at the southern border, questions about, particularly about some of the culture war issues. The biggest cheer here earlier on, when they were watching the inaugural address at the Capitol, was when he said, we're going to bring biology, traditional biology, he said, back to the federal government. There are only two genders, he said, men and women. That got a huge cheer. So I wonder if that'll be one of the ones that he signs here today, getting rid of all those DEI, those diversity and inclusion programs in the federal government, preventing any kind of teaching in schools, all these kinds of things, preventing people participating in sports if they've been one gender beforehand. Very controversial among a huge number of the population, but among Trump supporters, incredibly popular.
All right, Gary, we'll return to you a little bit later on. A desk at the front of the stage there with the presidential seal on it and a bunch of files with those executive orders that the president is about to sign, we believe, in the next few minutes. Thanks, Gary. Well, Gary was talking there about the issue of gender, and among the blizzard of announcements today was that pledge on gender, because the president has vowed to only allow the definition of gender to be a man or a woman. He said he'd end what he called government policy of trying to socially engineer race too, as well as gender in the public and private spheres. With more, here's Ros Atkins.
The new president promised Americans a revolution of common sense.
This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life.
The Democrats would contest that that's been the goal, but the presidency's no longer theirs. And one line from Donald Trump was greeted with loud applause.
As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
The White House says President Trump will establish male and female as biological reality and protect women from radical gender ideology. Officials working with Mr. Trump also say he'll end diversity, equity and inclusion inside the federal government, stopping funding across federal agencies. Here in Washington, Donald Trump is using his new political power to reshape the government's approach to cultural issues, and others may help too. At the inauguration ceremony, in front of President Trump's cabinet, sat the most powerful tech leaders in the world. The heads of Apple, Google, and Amazon were there. So was Elon Musk, who owns X and who frequently criticizes the woke mind virus. Mark Zuckerberg of Meta was there too. He recently stopped Facebook's fact-checking operation and has said the corporate world has moved away from masculine energy and is pretty culturally neutered. These men set the rules over which information is allowed and which is given prominence on some of the biggest digital platforms. And they were all there today. During the election, Trump's campaign spent millions of dollars running ads focusing on Kamala Harris and transgender issues. Donald Trump argued to Americans that Democrats had their priorities wrong, and from day one, he's showing us a different approach. His critics say this risks increasing unfairness and prejudice, but to him and his supporters, it's common sense. Ros Atkins, BBC News, Washington.
Let's go back to the Capital One Arena, where President Trump has arrived and is going to be holding a rally with his supporters there. His family are already on stage. And Gary O'Donoghue is there for us now. Who were those people just processing through the crowds there, Gary, in the last couple of minutes?
To process through were a bunch of police officers, emergency service personnel from Butler, Pennsylvania, would you believe? And they had the jacket of the firefighter, the volunteer firefighter, the retired volunteer firefighter, Corey Comparator, who died that night when Donald Trump's attempted assassination took place back in July. Now, you remember that famous jacket was there at the Republican National Committee conference. Also, he displayed that on stage. Well, it's here in the arena today for him signing these executive orders and for looking at the parade that's now going on behind me.
Okay, Gary, thank you for that. Gary O'Donoghue there at the Capital One Arena, not far from our position here in Washington. Many of the folk there were hoping to see the inauguration live on the Mall, but the weather cancelled that. It moved indoors, and many of the 20,000 people there able to see the man himself that they voted for as the new president. That's it from us here in Washington. Apologies we don't have a weather forecast for you, but now we're going to get all the news where you are. Have a very good evening.